We're doing chapter 7 this week. We're skipping a chapter. We're moving to food and agriculture. So I don't think it'll be a surprise to you. The PowerPoints are chapter 7, and the homework is chapter 7, and the discussion is chapter 7. So um, I think everybody should be okay with this. Um, in this first part of this, we're going to talk about how many people are chronically hungry, and why does hunger persist in the world where there's surplus in the world. Um, some of the risks of under nourishment or malnutrition, a poor diet or overeating, and a brief discussion on our primary food crops, because I don't think um, people are aware of how narrow our agriculture is. And by narrow, I mean how few species we depend on. And you might inquire, why does that matter? Well, we're going to cover that. It's important to look at the food staples that we're using, and see if it makes sense, if it's something that can keep us alive. Okay. So we're going to start with trends in food nutrition. Okay. And one of the first things that our author starts right off the bat is the fact that production depends on one or two genetically modified crops. And then once we choose that one or two genetically modified crops, then we're all in. We use abundant inputs of fuel, fertilizer, and economics, and we throw everything in, trying to make sure that these one or two strains feed us. And this is the primary problem that we have, and that's the fact that we are surviving effectively on a monoculture. Why is that a problem? One of the things that keeps us alive in this world is the fact that we are always adapting to our environment. And we go back to evolution. We talked about natural selection, and how natural selection implies that our progeny um, need to adapt to the environment. Okay, but the reason that our progeny has an opportunity to adapt to our environment is because they are given genetic variability. So, you have two, three, four different offspring. They're not all going to fare well. However, hopefully you pass enough genetic variability that some of them are going to do very well and some of them are not. But natural selection depends on the genetic variability of that offspring in order to adapt to its environment. Well, when you are depending on a monoculture, in other words, a single item, that genetic variability is not there. And it can be enough of a concern to make us lose sleep, because if we found a virus or a fungus, God help us, that targets the monoculture that we have selected, then our primary food supplies, our primary staples, could be wiped out. Why? Because we have selected against genetic variability. And this is a topic that keeps on coming up over and over. And the question of, is it really a good idea to depend on just a few staple foods with very, very narrow genetic variability. Okay. So, another important topic that's brought up by our author is that despite the fact that our world population has been increasing exponentially, right? It tells us that the world's population has more than doubled from 3 to 7 billion. What has happened to our food supply? Has it kept up with the population explosion? And surprisingly, the answer is that not only has it kept up, it has surpassed the population. That is mind blowing. Okay, so let's contemplate this for a second. The human population is increasing at an exponential rate, and our ability to feed the world has not decreased; it has actually surpassed the exponential rate of population. Wow, we so we owe a lot to a lot of things that we're going to criticize in this chapter, which is intensified agriculture, intensified farming. Okay, so a lot of these things that we are reviewing and contemplating whether they're good ideas. These are the tools that have kept us alive and fed during this time. The problem comes from the fact that we're not convinced that the system is sustainable. We're not sure that can continue to keep up with the population. Can it break down? Yeah, it can break down. Um, another another problem is that the intensified farming for our world population has become so large that it is starting to impact um, our world in a negative way. So it's important for us to review what we have been doing and contemplate that, the ends do not justify the means. Simply because we're feeding the world better does not mean that everything that we're doing is right. Okay. Um, so food production has risen even faster, while the average population growth in the past 50 years has been 1.7% per year. Food production has increased by 2.2% per year. That's incredible. Food availability has increased in most countries to well over 2,200 kilocalories per person per day. And this is the daily allotted requirement of energy. So what this is telling us is that per capita, we are providing more than this amount to the people of the world. Very incredible. So let's take a look at this. Okay, I love graphs. Graphs are, I said that pictures are worth 1,000 words. Let's try it again. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. Well, as a scientist, a graph is worth 1,000 numbers. So I love seeing graphs. And here we have two graphs of this one is calories and this one is protein. Okay. And what we're noticing is that it doesn't matter who we're looking at, the calories over time are increasing. Okay. The proteins over time are increasing. So let's see who's faring out the best. Let's take a look at this green line. Who is this green line? Us, North America. So we have a problem, okay? See this blue arrow right here? This blue arrow is indicative of what our daily allowance should be. Look at where we are, okay? This is kilocalories per day per person. So this is telling us that here in North America, instead of consuming 2,200 calories per day per person, back in the 1960s, we're already at 3,000 kilocalories. Here we are in 2015, and we're at 3,700 kilocalories. We're eating too many calories. And so here in North America, we have a different problem, which is obesity. Okay, look at the protein. The protein went from, what is that, like 95 grams per day per person back in the 1960s, and over here in 2015 we're looking at about 110 grams per day per person. That is a lot of protein. Okay, and then you can look at the bottom of the scale. Here's the bottom of the scale in gray. Who are these poor guys? Least developed countries. That's code for um, Eastern, um, Western Asia. There, I was about to choose the wrong side. Western Asia, and more importantly, Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, so Sub-Saharan Africa. Look at that. But even they are doing better. Okay, so by 2015, hypothetically, they are all reaching a per capita uh, daily intake that is in the healthy range. Over here, okay, by 2015, even they are reaching a daily protein intake that's in the healthy range. Above them, in the yellow, we have South Asia. Okay, so we're looking at India and parts of China. Okay, South Asia. Above them, in red, we have East Asia. So now we are looking at China proper. Okay, and look at them. So this is what's happening to China as they became a market system and they got rid of communism. Okay, they're a pseudo democracy, but at least got rid of communism. They entered the market system, and look at them; they're going crazy. Okay, so that's an increase in protein per person per day that is incredible. And holy moly, look at their daily caloric intake. They went from starvation, because really when you're hitting 1,500 kilocalories per day, that's pretty much starvation. Okay, they went from starvation all the way up to over 3,000 kilocalories per day per person. So they went from not having any food to having too much food. Let's see. We have Southern Africa. So South Africa, they fare pretty well. There were a there were most of that part were colonies of the British Empire, and so they have been faring pretty well over time. Okay, South Africa, uh, Northern Africa. As long as we don't hit Sub-Saharan Africa, we're usually doing pretty well. So Northern Africa has been doing very well. Okay, um, and then the black line is the last one that we should look at, and that's the world. So if you take all of these and you average them out, you should end up with the black line. And in the world, hypothetically, in the 1960s, we're doing fine. And now, if we're to average the entire world, we would be close to 3,000 kilocalories per person. And we would be at about 80 grams of protein per day per person. Both of them excellent numbers. Looking at the world, okay, this is the percentage of people that are out of food security. So 35% is the worst case scenario. And you can see that we're looking predominantly at sub-Saharan Africa, right? Here's Somalia. We're looking at Nepal. We're looking at Mongolia. We're looking at the Ukraine. And we're looking at Pakistan. Okay, the usual people that are in problems with food security. This is the Philippines. We always pick on the Philippines, but I don't know that they have food security issues per se. They're very much an aquatic culture. They the majority of the food that they get is from the ocean. 5 to 20%. We're looking at Russia, Northern Africa, South America, and Mexico. Okay, and then of course in the green, less than 5%. We're looking at North America, uh, parts of South America, um, Western Europe, of course, the Netherlands. Uh, this is arguable. Right now, there's a lot of war and strife going on in this area of the world. I don't think this is in green anymore. Okay, and Australia, um, Japan, South Korea, the usual list, Greenland, the usual list of developed countries. Okay, should not be a surprise. South Africa should not be a surprise. Okay, malnourishment across the world. Okay, so now we're looking at the percent of people that are malnourished in the world. Let's see. Let's look at the Northern Africa. They went from a little bit over 25% malnourishment down to less than 5%. Very good, right? Here's Latin America. They went from 20% to less than 5%. Here is developing regions. What are we talking about? We're talking about um, we're talking about India and China. So from about 37% falling down to less than 15%. Eastern Asia, China, yeah, China. We're getting started at 45%, and we fall down to what are we looking at here? About 10%. Not too bad. South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa is always the one that is struggling the most. Always the one that's struggling the most. So you can see that Sub-Saharan Africa starts at what is that, about 33%, and then it starts declining down, and in current data we're looking at less than 25%. That's a lot of problems. So about 25% of the population in Sub-Saharan Africa are still suffering from malnourishment, and that's the problem that we have. That's the problem that we have. So how do you reconcile this graph that tells us that we are producing enough food to give close to 3,000 kilocalories per day per person in the world, with this graph that tells us that we still have about 12% malnourishment in the world? Which one is right? The one that says that we have enough food for everybody, or the one that says that we still have sub-Saharan Africa with 25% of the people in starvation? Which one's right? Well, they're both right. We have made enough food to feed the world, but there's still parts of the world that are not getting that food. So we have a growth and distribution issue with food. And that's another topic that is brought up in environmental science. And I got to tell you, look at the discussion that we're doing this week, okay? Specifically, the one entitled The Next Bread Basket, okay? And you're going to find out that the world is looking to Africa as being the next bread basket of the world, because climate change, once it settles, if it does settle, but once it settles, is going to end up moving the bread basket of the world back to Africa. That means that countries like the United States and Canada and Mexico and South America that have been blessed with incredible growth rates of food we're not going to have that anymore. We're going to have to depend on Africa to produce food for the rest of us. So this part where we say we don't care what happens in Africa, we need to care, because if we don't care now about them, they're not going to care about us in the future. So that's something that we need to convince everybody about. When we talk about environmental science, we're not talking the health of the United States. We're talking about the health of the world. It is all inclusive. We're all in the same battle. And so it's important to take care of these people. And the United States historically has been helping Eastern Africa, specifically Kenya. We've always been over there. We've always been trying to help them. And, that's something that they can recognize, that we have been in aid to Africa. Food security. So, what is it? Food security is the ability to obtain sufficient healthy food on a day-to-day basis in a combined problem of economic, environmental, and social conditions. So the simplistic way is food security is the ability to obtain enough healthy food every day. Being able to get up in the morning and go, is getting food today going to be a worry? Normally, most of us, at least in the United States, that's not the primary worry that we have. And if it is, we're in trouble, because we're effectively one of the wealthier countries in the world. And if you don't have enough food, you need to know that there's resources all over these United States that will make sure that you have enough food. Okay? So food security is not supposed to be a problem in the United States. Okay? We are supposed to have enough healthy food, and we should not be worrying about whether or not we're going to eat that day. Okay? Having said that, food security is a combined problem of economic. What does that mean? It means that, can we buy the food? Is there a way of purchasing the food economically? Environmental, can we get the food? This is a very significant issue, because when I used to lecture in environmental science, I used to tell my students, soon is approaching the day in which we will be importing more food than we will be exporting. And this is important, because what that's indicative of is that we are no longer the breadbasket of the world. When we're the breadbasket of the world, we made enough food for ourselves and a significant surplus that we would hand out to other countries in the world. Okay, that is no longer the case. Now we're importing more food than we're exporting. Okay, and a lot of people go, "Gosh, food is really getting expensive." Yeah, that's what happens when you start importing food instead of creating your own. And now in this administration, uh, uh, um, they put tariffs on everything that's coming in. Those tariffs are not paid by the companies. The companies may pay a tax on imports, but when that import comes into the United States, we turn around and us as consumers have to pay for that increased taxes, for that increased tariff. And that is the reason that a lot of the food that we're purchasing these days is so expensive. It's mal administration uh, uh, from the highest level. So we have an environmental issue because we can no longer depend on ourselves to feed ourselves. Now we have to depend on Mexico. We have to depend on South America. We have to depend on Central America. All these other countries that produce food and must then import it to us. And then finally, social conditions. Okay, so I just finished discussing one, the implementation of tariffs. So all those things that happen politically, administratively, socially among people that cause the poor uh, uh, transfer and distribution of food. Okay, so these are three important things that affect food security. So environmental, it's important for you to know this. Okay, environmental items that affect food security in the poorest countries involve drought, the lack of water, or flood, the excess of water, or insect outbreak. So these are the three most significant environmental uh, impacts of food security. Um, what is the main leading cause of lack of food security? Any way you slice it, the answer is poverty. It's not that we don't know that we need to feed our children. It's not that we don't understand that we need to feed our children. It's not that we don't want to feed our children. The main cause is poverty. This is important. So it is poverty, the lack of funds that causes us to not be able to feed our children. Okay, job losses, lack of social services, um, and other factors. That's pretty much a big bucket there. Famines. Okay, now thank God, the United States will never. Not gonna formica here. The United States will never see a famine. Famine is something that happens in well, predominantly in Africa. Okay, so famines are large-scale food shortages with widespread starvation, social disruption, and economic chaos. This is the worst of the worst things that can happen to people. Okay, but even in sub-Saharan Africa, famines are most serious when there's drought and war together. That's important for you to know. If you haven't caught on by now, if it's in red, it's probably something you should know. Okay, so droughts, and forgive me, famines are driven by an environmental factor, drought, the lack of water, and a social strife, which is war. These two things together are the main drives of famines. And here's poor children in Somalia waiting to get their daily staple food. Okay, and this is another problem. The author used to address this. I don't know if Cunningham does anymore, but this is yet another problem with famines, is the fact that people that typically do not congregate together must come together in order to obtain resources such as medical aid and food and water. And so these people typically don't see each other. Now they're all congregated in close proximity in one place, and consequently, if there's infectious diseases around, and I hate to say this, but if you're going to find infectious diseases, sub-Saharan Africa is a good place to find them. They can spread quickly. So these poor people have already been traumatized by what? Well, remember, it's a famine. So what's driving it? They have been traumatized by drought, so they don't have any food. They have been traumatized by displacement, war. They finally made it here. Okay, they've lost family members. Notice that these are all approximately the same age group. That means that mom and dad are either lost or dead. And just when they're having a little bit of hope, a communicable disease gets spread because of their close proximity, and now they have to fight that. So famines have a lot of issues. Okay, switching. How much food do we need? Okay, so um, what can we say? We're talking about nutrition, not just amount, but nutrition. Okay, and this is important because when we talk about food, you're not only talking about quantity. You should also be talking about quality. Okay, so here it says the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that nearly 3 billion people, about half the world's population, suffer from vitamin, mineral, or protein deficiencies. And I gotta tell you, I've looked at this historically, and a lot of times we are our worst enemies. Okay, for instance, if we have a choice to eat rice, most of us will purchase white rice, not brown rice. Well, here's the problem. Brown rice, the rice with the husk on it, is rich in fiber, and the husk is also the part of the rice that is rich in vitamins. So if you remove the husk from the rice, you're removing the essential fiber, you're removing the essential vitamins from the rice, and the only thing that you're consuming is starch, carbohydrates. You might as well be eating candy. So, and here's the interesting part. In order to end up with white rice, you literally have to process the brown rice, which means you have to take the husk off of it. It literally takes more work to make white rice than brown rice. But because we have a preference for white rice, that's what we eat, even though it is not as good for us as brown rice. Now you end up with nutrient deficiencies because you have stripped your staple food of all the nutrients that it has. And we have done this so many times. Okay, it's just peculiar. Okay, so examples of deficiencies that we have. We don't have a lot of space or time to talk about this. So the author only addresses 3 of them. There are many, 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 many more. But Cunningham addressed vitamin A, folic acid, and iodine. Okay, so folic acid is vitamin B, um, and you might sometimes hear vitamin B complex, and the reason for that is because the vitamin B's are essential to um, catabolic reactions in the body, the assimilation of food. Okay, and if you don't have vitamin B complex, you can be suffering because you will not be able to harvest energy from your food. Um, what is the richest source of vitamin B complex? Yeast. So if you eat bread made from yeast, you would not have a folic acid deficiency. Um, if you drank, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, beer, I'm not talking about a Budweiser, but if you drank a bottle of beer that is fermented in a bottle with yeast, the yeast that you drink in that bottle would be very rich in vitamin B complex. This is a very, as a matter of fact, when you can buy yeast at the store, that's where they get the yeast from. They get it from beer vats. Okay, so that's folic acid, and look at this. Is linked to neurological problems in babies. So you might ask the question, so you mean to tell me that if these babies were given a little bit of yeast, they would be better off? Well, no, I wouldn't do that. There's some people that are not tolerant to yeast and they can actually end up with yeast infections. But it doesn't mean that you cannot add the yeast to food and then they would get the folic acid. Almost the same outcome. And yeah, it would save them from neurological problems. Shortages in vitamin A. Vitamin A is important because it's part of the retinal pigments in your eye. So about 350,000 people go blind every year because they don't have enough vitamin A. Can you imagine? Sources of vitamin A are carrots, liver, beef liver. It's very, very high in vitamin A. Spinach. Okay. So now you can ask the question. So if these babies were given vitamin A, would they be able to see? Yes. Literally 2 to 3 cents of vitamin A would be enough to prevent blindness in these children. And then the third one is iodine deficiencies, which cause goiter. Okay, that's a swelling of the thyroid gland, and the reason it swells is because it's trying to make a hormone, thyroxine, and a precursor to that hormone is iodine. So effectively, you have this thyroid uh, gland that's trying to produce a product without the presence of iodine. And as it works harder and harder to do the impossible, it hypertrophies and then it ends up swelling, and that is called a goiter. Okay, so these three are important. Again, folic acid for neurological problems, vitamin A for blindness, and iodine and goiter. Where do you get iodine from? Iodized salt. So there's goiter right there. Okay, that's an advanced case of goiter. Malnourishment, lack of specific nutrients. In children, you can have kwashiorkor or marsomas. This young child right here is suffering from marsomas. Kwashiorkor, you've seen those. If you look at the commercials from UNICEF, and they're showing those poor Kenyan children that look emaciated like this, but they have a bloated stomach, okay, that's kwashiorkor. And effectively, uh, they are not, they're not fat. That bloated stomach is because their digestive system cannot process the the small amount of protein that they have, and they end up with that bloated stomach. So, what does health look like? So this is the Harvard food pyramid. I'm sure you have all seen it. If you've taken food and nutrition, hopefully Valerie has beaten you up with his food pyramid. Okay, and for us, the most important part of this food pyramid is daily exercise and weight control. And to be honest, it doesn't even have to be rigorous exercise. It could be something as simple as walking. Okay, so uh, it has been shown, there's literature to demonstrate that walking is enough to um, halt Heart disease. If you're an American, you need to pay attention to this because the leading cause of death in the United States is heart disease because we're a wealthy country. So what do? You walk. Walking will not only halt heart disease, it has been shown that it will reverse heart disease. That is incredible. Additionally, and if you're one of my older students, you're already paying attention to this, but we have uh, good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. We have HDL and LDL. Uh, uh, HDL is high density glycolipids. LDL is low density glycolipids. The HDL is a good cholesterol. The LDL is a low, is a bad. And there's really no such thing as good and bad. Really, what's going on is that HDL is uh, is the cholesterol that moves fats, triglycerides, and other lipids from the liver to the intestine to eliminate it from the body. And LDL does the exact opposite. It takes lipids from the intestine and moves it to the liver, and then the liver distributes those lipids throughout the body. So what happens, and this is very awesome, is that if you walk 30 minutes to an hour every day, you you increase your HDL over your LDL. And this means that your body will, as a consequence, remove lipids and fats and cholesterol from your system simply because it has more HDL than LDL. In the health sciences, they have a name for this. It's called a protective level. Imagine that. How valuable is it that doctors call it a protective level of HDL? What is it protecting you against? It's protecting you against heart disease. Okay, it's protecting you against heart disease. So there you go. Two reasons to walk. If you want a third reason to walk, you have to contemplate that your immune system, which goes through lymph nodes, okay? We have lymph nodes, sublingual lymph nodes, we have axillary, and we have inguinal in our groin lymph nodes. These lymph nodes are rich in T cells and B cells. That's where antigen presentation takes place in order to launch what's called the adaptive immune system. Okay, But in order for this to happen, uh, the lymphatic system in your body has to pass uh, um, uh, dendritic cells presenting antigen through these lymph nodes. Okay, and what's happening? Well, what drives that lymphatic fluid to the lymph nodes? Have you ever wondered about that? Because I'm going to tell you, it's not your heart. Your heart only pumps blood. It does not move the lymphatic system. So what does move the lymphatic system? Well, the short answer is your legs. So every time that you make a muscle with your leg, about about half a cup of blood is pushed up, and a slightly smaller amount of lymphatic fluid is also pressed up. It is the act of walking that pushes that lymphatic fluid up. Okay, and uh, and now it will go through your lymph nodes. So if you're somebody who is sick frequently, it might be because you don't exercise. If you did walk, what would happen is your lymphatic fluid would go through your lymph nodes uh, uh, more frequently. Um, Foreign viruses and bacteria would be detected quicker. Your adaptive immune system would find these foreign objects and attack them immediately. And as a result, you would be a healthier person. So, all that to say that walking every day is an incredibly beautiful thing to do. Okay. Now what? Well, fruits and vegetables, that should be the majority of your. As a matter of fact, a lot of dietitians right now are pushing towards a meat-free diet. Okay. Um, Gosh, I can't do it. I'm sorry. I like my protein. I can't do it. I have to. I was born an omnivore, and I think I'm gonna die an omnivore. But what I will do is I'll compromise and eat my vegetables first. So vegetables, uh, polyunsaturated oils such as olive oil, okay, um, canola, soy, corn, sunflower, peanut. All these oil, a lot of these oils are polyunsaturated oils, which are good for you. And then, of course, fiber. This fiber, guys, I'm talking to you guys. If you don't want to, one of the leading causes of death in men, colon cancer. So you need to keep your colon clean. How do you keep your colon clean? A high fiber diet. Okay. So brown rice, whole wheat pasta, oats, all that stuff, high fiber, and this will actually diminish your incidence of colon cancer. Um, let's see, legumes, okay, seeds, beans, and then here's our protein: chicken, fish. What I will say is that eating fish occasionally, and I got to tell you, this is expensive. I mean, you have to be almost independently wealthy to buy a fillet of any fish right now. But if you can eat it mm, 2 or 3 times a month, it would be great because these guys are saturated in omega-3 fatty acids, which again makes your cholesterol go down and it's incredibly healthy for you. So fish is a great thing to consume. Eggs, we should stay away from them because they're high in cholesterol. Chicken is okay. It doesn't hurt us one way or the other. What we are told to do is to stay away from red meats, which is which is what breaks my heart because I like my cow. Nice to pet, better to chew, right? And then of course dairy products because they're high in calcium. Although if you don't want to eat dairy products and you want to consume something that's high in calcium, you can go down into the vegetable bin here and grab spinach or kale. Those things, very, very green vegetables are high in calcium. And this is important because there's some people that can't handle this protein. Okay. And then sparingly, we're supposed to stay away from red meat. At one time, they tried to make a connection between the consumption of red meat and pork in cancer. And every once in a while, there's literature that tries to indicate that. Okay. Um, so we're supposed to stay away from red meat. Um, Butter because of saturated fats. Refined grains because effectively what that means is that you're eating starch without any nutrients. An example is white rice, bread, pasta, potatoes. Ugh, I love them, but they're terrible for you. And here's the thing that's going to kill all of us right here. I mean, you might as well be doing crack cocaine at this point. Sugary drinks. I feel like they're just out to kill us. Read how much sugar there are in these drinks. Pick up a sobe. A sobe is a Canadian drink. I think Canadians are out to kill us, okay? If there's like 65 to 75 grams of sugar in one sobe. There's a word for that. It's not soda, that is a syrup. You are literally drinking syrup. Hey, I'm thirsty. I think I'm going to drink syrup. Who does that? And then you end up with this high incidence of diabetes in the world. Well, yeah, because your poor pancreas is being beaten summarily by daily intakes of high sugar drinks. Every time that high sugar drink goes into your system, oh, and I can draw. I keep on forgetting that I can draw. This is cool. Every time that you have, but yeah, green is good. That 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 spike in high sugar, okay? What does your poor pancreas have to do? Your poor pancreas has to release insulin to stay up with that spike, okay? So if you keep on doing this little thing where you keep on introducing ridiculous amount of sugar into your system, your poor pancreas has to go from 0 to 100 and then come back down. And then 0 to 100 and come back down. And then 0 to 100 and come back down. Are you kidding me? Are you trying to destroy your pancreas? I know people that will drink like half a gallon of Pepsi a day. Not Diet Pepsi, the straight stuff, you know. And I tell them, stop doing this, you're going to kill themselves. That's all right. I don't intend to live that long. Wow. Okay. More power to you. But really, get away from sugary drinks, sweets, and carbonated drinks. They they're going to kill you. They are going to kill you. Okay. Let's see. So overeating, okay. Typically, obesity is characteristic of wealthy developed nations, okay? That's something you should know. Typically, obesity is characteristic of wealthy developed nations. However, this means the United States, uh, Western Europe, you know, the usual suspects. But recently, um, this has been introducing new developing countries. Diseases once thought to afflict only wealthy nations, such as heart attack, stroke, and diabetes, are now becoming the most prevalent cause of death and disability everywhere. In the US and increasingly in Europe, China, and developing countries, high processed foods rich in sugars and fats have become a large part of the diet. So now in Europe, China, and other developing countries, they're having the same issues that we are. Here's obesity, okay? Here's the United States. 1960, no matter where I put this thing, is in the way. Have you noticed that? 1960, we're looking at a little bit over 40% of the people were obese, okay? In 2015, we're looking at about 66, about 2/3 of Americans are obese. Here's the United Kingdom, Canada, France, Japan. I don't think Japan is right. I have trouble believing this. According to this chart, about 22% of Japanese are obese. When I think of Japanese people, I think of a lot of things. Obesity is not one of them. But anyways, that's what our graph tells us. The point being here is that the industrialized countries and developing countries are becoming obese. One of the issues that our author addresses is the waste of food waste. And it says global food waste amounts to some 30% of all food production, about 1.3 billion tons annually, as food is spoiled in storage, in transit, used inefficiently, or thrown away after preparation. Okay. And I got, this happens all the time in restaurants, stores, as food is becoming older. You know, they don't deliver it to uh, um, a mission where people can take advantage of it. They just throw it away. They actually have a policy to that effect. I don't want to mention anybody, but there's literally stores in Klamath Falls, for example, where in the old days, as things were becoming a little bit old under the in the chicken rack or something like that, they would sell them at a discount. They don't do that anymore because they don't want to attract customers that are only interested in benefiting from these discounts. Well, there's a name for customers that are trying to benefit from the discounts. It's called poor people, and they're trying to do their very best to keep themselves fed. But in order to discourage this, instead of giving the food away at a discount, they just simply throw it away. It's incredible. In my opinion, it's a sin. Let's see here. Okay, what do we eat? This is interesting. So this is an analysis of the staple foods that we consume. Okay, and as Americans, we consume three main staple foods: corn, rice, and wheat. Those are the main staple foods that we consume. When you go to the store and you see 1,000 different things out there, uh, that variability is a lie. Most of that food is processed food that's made predominantly from these three main ingredients: maize, which is corn, rice, and wheat. Okay, look at this. Look at the production in metric tons. Okay, so corn in 1990, 483 metric tons. In 2010, 1,060 metric tons, more than doubling. Okay, rice, 519 to 741. Now, for livestock, for feeding our livestock, okay, and what does livestock mean? Well, it means beef, chicken, and pork. What do they use? They are fed corn and soybean. Those are the two main staple foods that are used to feed our livestock: corn and soybean. Okay, so a lot of times we don't see the increase in consumption of corn and soybean. Like right now, there's a big soybean uh, uh, fight taking place in the United States, and it comes back to these stupid tariffs that have been imposed on incoming items. Okay, and high tariffs were placed on soybeans. Okay, so now our American farmers have lost those markets. They can no longer export soybeans because they have lost these markets. And where have they gone? They have gone to Brazil. Brazil is selling soybean to whoever wants it. It's a new cash crop for them. Okay, and who is suffering? American farmers. Okay, because the world uses soybean to fatten their beef and their chicken and their pork. Okay, but again, those are the two main staple items for feeding livestock. Look at the increase in corn. It's incredible. So 2015, these aren't agreeing, are they? So in 2015, according to this, corn increased to 1,060 million metric tons. Over here, they're calling it 350 million metric tons. Wonder what Cunningham is doing. But here's our corn, here's our soy, and here's our wheat. Now, meat production. Meat production is both good and bad. It's good because meat is expensive. So when countries start using meat, it's an indicator that their economy is doing better and that their population is becoming more demanding because they have more power, more buying power. That's the good side. The bad side is that meat is more expensive. And when you choose to eat meat, uh, it takes more resources to make that meat. And so we put a greater strain on resources that are already strained. Okay. This is, an example of China. Okay. Meat and dairy consumption has quadrupled in the last 40 years. And that doubling in China, at least in the last 40 years. Here's what the problem is right here. Okay. If you're to take grain and just eat a diet of vegetables and grain, what you get is what you get. However, if you start eating fish, it takes about 1.5 of this grain to feed this fish in order for you to have that fish. Does that make sense? If you're to eat chicken, instead of consuming 1 kilogram of grain, you would have to feed 2 kilograms of grain to this chicken for you to obtain 1 kilogram of chicken. So chicken is more expensive than fish. If you're going to a pig, it would take, instead of eating 1 kilogram of bread, you would have to feed 3 kilograms of bread to a pig for 1 kilogram of pig. And the worst one, beef. You would have to feed 8 kilograms of grain to a cow in order for you to harvest 1 kilogram of cow. So this is another reason to stay away from red meats because they are so expensive. So one of the things that they encourage us to do if we want to put less strain on the world nutrition is to eat further down. Okay, when they say down on the food on the food scale, they're talking about down in this direction. So the further down that you consume, the less that it's going to cost, and the more that you're going to get for your money. But then again, you're not going to get this protein. But we are encouraged to eat further down on this scale. So greens is good, you know. If you want to eat fish, that's fine. If you want to eat chicken, that's fine. If you want to eat pig, that's okay. But when you make it to that cow and you have to feed it 8 times for 1 kilogram of beef, that is pretty expensive. So that's where we're discouraged to move from eating these cows. This is important for you to know. The second law of thermodynamics provides the basis that we could feed more people if we ate grain instead of livestock. Okay? So, in other words, the second law says that every time that we transition energy from one type to another, we lose efficiency, right? So, the second law of thermodynamics provides the basis that we could feed more people if we ate grain instead of livestock, because you would not lose the efficiency of this grain. It would go from the grain to you. That's one transition. But if it goes to this guy, it goes from the grain to the cow, where we lose a lot, and then from the cow to us. Okay? Okay, so now we're talking about this horrible process called confined animal feeding operation. Uh, um, well, as I say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So let's take a look at it. This is what it looks like. Okay. Essentially, it's a high density confinement where it's whatever it is. It's almost in what's the word I'm looking for? In how dreadful it is to the animals. It's only secondary to what we used to do to veal. So I don't know if you remember what veal is, but veal is very soft meat. And the way that they used to do that is they would keep a cow confined so that they can't walk. And then they feed it. Okay. And then, of course, the meat would be very tender. Well, that's very inhumane. Okay. And these confined, confined animal feeding operations are, well, equally inhumane. So, a high density of cows. In Europe, they even went worse. You know, they were trying to save money. And when cows died, instead of getting rid of the cow, they they shredded it and fed it to other cows, and that's how they ended up with mad cow disease. Because why? Because we're disgusting. We're disgusting. Where does it say that cows should eat cows? So obviously something terrible had to happen. Okay, but this is something that's taking place. This is with chickens. Okay, and I gotta tell you, this this is um, this is something that's terrible, but it's also a um, a place where we can say that we're winning. And it's very interesting because we never imagined how we were going to win. Okay, what does this mean? Well, in order to prevent this from happening, what do we have to do? Do we have to lobby the government? Do we have to legislate? Did we have to do marches? Do we have to? The answer is no. What did we do? We did something so easy, so predictable. We chose to purchase what's called free range chickens. Okay. So, in other words, we chose not to buy these chickens. We chose to buy chickens that had a normal life. Okay. And, if you're a producer of chickens and your customers are not buying what you're putting out, you're hard pressed. You need to change your marketing. Okay. And that's exactly what happened. We We flexed our consumer muscle, and it worked. And now we're looking at this in retrospect and going, really? That's all it took? I mean, all this time we've been fighting companies to do the right thing, and all we had to do was select what we bought. So that has been an enlightening period for us. So we're looking at a time where these confined animal feeding operations will soon be um, into history because we have chosen not to buy these animals. This is inhumane. These animals are fed um, so rigorously that they develop breasts that are very heavy, and they cannot even lift their own weight. Okay, it's a ridiculous thing. So as a consequence, a lot of these chickens end up dying because they can't function normally physiologically. So one of the things that you don't see here is that there's two or three people whose sole job all day long is to walk this entire length back and forth, finding finding dead chickens and throwing them away because the environment is so unhealthy that these animals are dying on their of their own accord. Okay, incredible. Um, and we're trying to do something similar with aquaculture. Okay, so aquaculture is important. So as it says here, seafood provides about 15% of all animal protein eaten by humans, and is the main animal protein source for about a billion out of our 7 billion people. But recently, 13 of the 17 major marine fisheries have declined dramatically and become commercially unstable. So as a result, we have started aquaculture, and it's increasing uh, um, the amount of seafood that we have. So this is important. Okay, fish are being grown in fish farms, and they take very low space. And I'm gonna tell you, we still have problems with it. We do, but we're fine tuning them, and it's getting to the point where we can actually make a balanced aquaculture with the ecosystem, and this might actually be a successful, sustainable system in the future. Okay, so again, where this doesn't work for cows and chickens, our current aquaculture, which is a similar concept, it's working because we're starting to uh, work in equilibrium in it, making sure that it's part of an ecosystem. And that's where we're going to stop for now. I hope I didn't bore you too much, and I'll see you guys in a little bit. Okay.